Even a native English speaker might not get a band 9 in the IELTS speaking test without the right preparation. So in this video, I'm going to show you 9 tips to help you get a very high band score in IELTS speaking and how to avoid common mistakes. Okay, let's get started with the first tip, which is understand the basics. Before you can even think about getting a band 9 in IELTS speaking, you need to understand how the test works. You need to know the format, the types of questions they'll ask in each part, and how long you need to answer for in each part. This is going to save you stress on test day because you'll know exactly what you should do and what not to do. So let's quickly talk about the basics. The IELTS speaking test is a face-to-face interview with an IELTS examiner. Now, most people choose to do it face-to-face, but there are some options if you want to do it online. The test goes for 13 to 14 minutes in total. There are 3 parts, part 1, part 2, and part 3, and there are around 15 to 20 questions in total, depending on a lot of different factors. Now, just before we talk about the 3 parts, if you're serious about getting a band 7 or higher in IELTS, make sure you check out our complete band 7 plus preparation course, because it's going to teach you how to get a band 7 or higher in every single part. And it's been created with the help of a former IELTS examiner, so you're not just guessing. You're learning what examiners are really looking for. If you're interested, the link is in the description below. All right, now let's talk a little bit more in detail about the 3 different parts. Let's start with part 1. So part 1 lasts for 4 to 5 minutes. And in part 1, you will get asked general questions about yourself. It's not a big introduction. This is what a lot of students think, but it's actually not a big introduction. Moving on to part 2, this will last for 3 to 4 minutes in total. And in this part, you need to speak on a topic for 2 minutes, but you have 1 minute to think and prepare your answer. And finally, in part 3, this part will last for 4 to 5 minutes, and it's a discussion with the examiner on questions related to the topic in part 2. So if your topic in part 2 is describe a teacher that you remember, well, the questions in part 3 will probably be related to teaching or education. Moving on to tip number 2, which is show the examiner how good your English is. This is something I see all the time in speaking tests. Students speak and give the shortest answers possible with no detail and no extra information. Remember, it's your job to show the examiner how good your English is, because the examiner doesn't know you. Even if you're a native speaker, the examiner doesn't know your English level. So how can you show the examiner? Well, the first thing you can do is give longer, detailed answers. Don't give short answers. So for example, don't just say yes. Don't just say no. Don't just give a 1-sentence answer. You need to give longer, detailed answers. The next thing you can do is not copy the words that the examiner uses. So for example, if the examiner says, "Do you like listening to music?" Well, you should not say, "Yes, I like listening to music," because you're just copying the examiner. You're not showing the examiner how good your English is. The next thing you can do is use a wide range of vocabulary. Instead of just using very basic words, you need to show the examiner a wide range of vocabulary, especially if you're going for a band 7 or higher. The fourth thing you can do is use a wide range of grammar structures. So don't just use the same grammar structures again and again and again. Don't always use the present simple. Maybe try and use the present perfect. Maybe try to use the passive voice. Maybe try and use by plus verb ing. Use a variety of grammar structures. And finally, moving on to number 5, show stress or use stress and intonation in your speech. Don't speak like a robot. This is something that I see all the time in speaking tests. Students speak in a monotone like this. My favorite food is pizza and I eat it all the time. Well, you can't do that if you want a higher band score when it comes to speaking and pronunciation. You need to use stress and you need to use intonation. Moving on to tip number 3 now, which is understand how the examiner decides your score. A lot of students say they want a band 7 for speaking, but they have no idea how the examiner actually decides their band score. So, how can you get a band 7 if you don't know what you need to do to get a band 7? Well, the examiner looks at 4 things when deciding your score. First, they look at your fluency and coherence. This is about how smoothly you speak. They also think about the range of vocabulary you use. They think about the range of grammar you use, and they also take into consideration your pronunciation. Now, each of these 4 areas is worth 25% of your speaking band, and for each area, you can get a band score between 0 and 9. There are no 0.5s. If you want to know what to do to get a band 7 in each of those 4 areas, make sure you join our preparation course. We also teach you how to improve all of those 4 areas. Now, the next thing, or the next tip, is look at high-level answers. So apart from just knowing how the examiner decides your score, you also need to know what a high-level answer actually looks like. Because if you don't, well, how are you supposed to give one yourself? It's probably going to be very difficult, right? So let's take a quick look at this question here. What kinds of public transport are there in your city? Now let's have a look at a low-level answer. We have buses and trains. I usually take the bus. It's cheap. So if we look at this answer, there are so many problems with it, especially if the person speaking is trying to get a band 7 plus. First, there is a very limited range of vocabulary, and there's only very basic meaning conveyed with these words. Apart from that, the grammar is also very limited. The sentences are very short, and there's nothing special or high level about the grammar. And also, just in general, the answer is way too short because it doesn't show the examiner how good the person's English is. Now, let's move on and have a look at a higher level answer. So here it is. There are a variety of public transport options, but the main ones are the subway and the buses. So you can see already this first sentence is longer than the full answer for the previous answer we just looked at. Also note, we've got some higher level vocabulary, we've got the word variety, and we've got the word options. The subway is usually the fastest way to get around, while buses are more suitable for shorter trips or areas that don't have a train station nearby. Again, we've got a much longer sentence. We've got some higher level vocabulary, get around, suitable. And if you look at the word while, we are using a conjunction to join our ideas instead of just having 2 short sentences. And to finish off the answer, we can give one more sentence. Both are relatively affordable and run fairly regularly, so commuters don't have to wait long. So we're using some higher level vocabulary again, relatively affordable, commuters, and we have also made a longer sentence. And just in regards to the vocabulary, if you look at all of the vocab in bold, you will see that most lower level students don't use this type of vocabulary. Most lower level students just use very basic, easy, common vocabulary. So if you want to improve your speaking and sound like a higher level candidate, you need to use higher level vocabulary. Now, the next question is, where can I find high-level answers? Well, we've got ebooks with hundreds of questions and band 7 plus answers for each part of the speaking test, so you will know exactly how to make a high-level answer for a huge range of topics. The link is in the description. Okay, the next thing you need to do is learn to paraphrase. Let's talk about watching movies. When you have free time, do you like to watch movies? Yes, when I have free time, I really like watching movies. So that's exactly what you don't want to do in the speaking test. Why? Why is that? Well, because you're just copying the examiner and you're not showing how good your English is. So, what should you do instead? Well, either don't repeat the question at all or learn to paraphrase. Now, paraphrasing means when you say what someone else has said using different words. You keep the same meaning but you use your own words. And that's the key thing. You keep the same meaning, but you use your own words. So now let me show you some examples of paraphrasing so you can see how to do it. Let's pretend the question is, do you enjoy watching movies at the cinema? Well, you could answer with something like this. Yeah, I'm really into films. So look at that. We have not said movies. We've said films. We have not said enjoy. We have said into, especially when I have some free time on the weekend or . So you can see here the meaning is the same, but we've just changed the words. Let's look at another example now. Let's pretend the question is, how do you usually travel around your city? Just before I show you the answer, quickly pause the video and see if you can answer this question, but try to paraphrase the question itself. Well, here is the answer. Most of the time, this is a different way to say usually. I get from place to place. Well, that's another way to say travel around your city. So I get from place to place using public transport. It's extremely convenient and provides . So make sure you practice your paraphrasing. It's going to make your speaking sound much more professional and natural. Now, tip number 6 is practice different topics. In the speaking test, you never know what topics you're going to get, so you need to be prepared for as many topics as possible. Now, when it comes to part 1, you will always be asked about work, study, or where you live. So you definitely need to be prepared for those topics. Apart from that, here are some other topics that might come up for speaking part 1. Being bored, books, computers, dreams, fashion, social media, space and the stars, sports, t-shirts, and travel. So you can see that these topics are pretty common. They're everyday topics. They're nothing really academic or unusual. Now, when it comes to part 2, let me show you some topics you might get. Number 1, a person you admire, a memorable trip you took, an object that's special to you, a time you helped someone, a book or movie you enjoyed, a goal you achieved, a difficult decision you made, a celebration you attended, a skill you'd like to learn, and finally, a place you'd like to visit. So if you have a look at all of these topics, you'll see that they're all about you and your experiences. And you'll also see that most of the topics are pretty simple. So for example, a book or movie you enjoyed. This is a pretty simple or pretty common topic. A memorable trip you took, so talk about a holiday you went on. Now let's move on to part 3. Here are some potential part 3 topics you might get. Decision-making, education, entertainment, friendship, helping others, success, technology, tourism, traditions, or travel habits. So you can see that with the part 3 topics, some of them might be a little bit more advanced. So for example, traditions, it's not something that you really talk about on an everyday basis. Now, just before I mentioned that you should prepare for different topics, but what does that actually mean? Well, the first thing you can do is look at questions for each topic and see if you can answer them. Think about what you would say for each question. And also, when you look at a lot of questions, you're going to see patterns. You'll see that a lot of the questions are quite similar. So, for example, a lot of questions say how often, or they ask how often. Some questions use the word will. Some questions use the phrase, do you prefer? So you'll see that a lot of questions, they're quite similar, but they're just about a different topic. Now, the next thing you can do is learn some vocabulary for some common topics. Because obviously, if you don't know any words to talk about a certain topic, it's going to be very hard to get a high score. And finally, you should actually practice answering the questions, because just looking at questions is not enough. Just watching these videos is not enough. You need to know that you can answer them confidently and use some good grammar and some good vocabulary. Moving on to tip number 7, which is don't make small grammar or vocabulary mistakes. I've done thousands of speaking tests and I see the same basic grammar mistakes over and over again. And if you make basic mistakes, it's obviously going to reduce your band score. So let me show you an example. Let's pretend you get this question here. Do you prefer mornings or evenings? Well, let me show you a sample answer which has several mistakes. So just quickly pause the video, have a look at this answer and think about what is wrong here. Well, the first thing is with don't. My brain don't work very well. Well, we shouldn't say don't, we need to say doesn't, because brain is singular, so we need to use brain with does or does not. The next one is in evening. This mistake is regarding a missing article. We don't have the. The correct way to say this would be in the evening. And this is a very common grammar issue that non-native speakers have, is using articles a, an, and the. So make sure you learn how to use a, an, and the. And finally, the last one, it's a pretty simple one. To relaxing, well, we should say to relax. Most of the time after we have to, we need to have verb 1. So make sure you don't make very basic mistakes like this, because a lot of the time it's going to stop you from moving from that band 6 level for vocabulary and grammar to band 7. Because in regards to grammar, for example, the band descriptors say that you can frequently produce error-free sentences. But if you're always making very basic mistakes with your grammar, well, you won't satisfy those requirements and you won't be able to get to a band 7. So how do you know if you're making mistakes or not? Well, you need to get feedback somehow. Because if you don't know what you're doing wrong, then you won't be able to fix it. Let's move on to tip number 8 now, which is record yourself and listen. A lot of the time, the way you hear yourself is different to the way you actually sound. So what you can do to improve your speaking is to actually hear yourself, to listen to yourself. Now, I know it might feel a little bit awkward at first, but recording yourself and listening back can show you exactly what you're doing well and exactly what needs to be improved. So here's a simple way to do it step by step. It's a 4-step process. The first thing you should do is choose a topic. So you need to pick an IELTS speaking question and set a timer. After that, you need to record your answer. So start speaking naturally as if you're in the real test. Don't script it. The important thing is to speak naturally. After that, listen back carefully. Okay, listen to the recording and think about your grammar. Think about your pronunciation. Think about your fluency. So in regards to fluency, you can ask yourself, do you sound smooth? In regards to your pronunciation, you can ask yourself, am I using stress or do I sound like a robot? Am I just using a monotone? And finally, take notes and improve. So write down any mistakes, then try again and improve. And this is why a lot of students stay at the same band score for months and months, if not years and years, because they never think about what they need to improve and they never focus on their weaknesses. Now let's move on to the next tip, which is say something if you don't understand. The last tip is really simple, but so important. If you don't understand the question, don't just sit there in silence. I've seen so many students just freeze up and say nothing. And that's one of the worst things you can do, because a native speaker would never just stay or go quiet. They wouldn't just sit there and say nothing. They would say something. So what can you say if you don't understand? Well, the first phrase is, sorry, could you say that again? So if you don't hear the question, or even if you don't understand the question, you can say, sorry, could you say that again? And then the examiner will repeat the question. You could say, could you repeat that, please? Again, same thing. The examiner will repeat the question. Now, if you don't understand a word, you can say, what does word mean? So for example, what does prevalence mean? What does encyclopedia mean? And you should ask the examiner. If you don't know, ask. There's nothing wrong with it. It's completely natural. If you don't say anything and you just sit there in silence, well, that's not natural. You could say, could you explain what you mean by word or phrase? That's totally fine. You could say, do you mean? So if you're not sure, you can paraphrase what the examiner said or asked, and then you can ask them. So, you could say something like, do you mean kids who are under 10? Just to make sure you understand the question. And finally, you could say, I'm not sure I understand. Could you say it another way? So they were 9 tips for IELTS speaking. If you want 9 tips for IELTS listening, check out this video right here. Thanks for watching. Take care and good luck with your studies.